Good morning. We're probably still going to have other people coming in. I'm Nancy Hilliard. I'm part of United Methodist Women. And this morning, our guest speakers with us are Rick Stravers, Executive Director of Open Doors, and Stephanie Hoffman, Deputy Director of Open Doors. And Rick is retiring, sadly, and probably gladly, at the end of January. And Stephanie will become the new executive director. So we are really fortunate to have them with us.
I'm ready to get it all morning.
So those of you that were at 8:30 service, it was a little sedate. So we want a lot of noise at 11 because Stephanie's like, this church is so quiet. We need some people to get fired up, okay? We want some, amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Let me do it. Yes, he did.
What else?
Let me do it. Yes.
Yes, yes. I'm there. Amen. Praise Jesus. Anyway, so that gives you a few ideas to start with. So 11 o'clock service, that's what we're going to be doing, okay? All right, thank you. Thank you both for being here.
Now that's Stephanie's input. She didn't ask me. I'm Episcopalian. So unless you can read it from the book, don't say anything. It's not safe. So good morning. We just came, some of you are at 8:30, I guess. We just came from a fabulous experience together, I thought. It was lovely to be here. And we're glad to have this time with you now. Stephanie and I are long colleagues. We've worked together 12 years in helping each other and our organization work and our community work to try to respond to the incredible need in our community for places to live, for people who are in a housing crisis. And part of what we want to do this morning is to just sort of explore that crisis a little bit with you and think through maybe some ways to respond. So one of the first things we'd like to do is ask you just to take a little quiz with us that we call the American Housing Quiz. I don't have pens for you, but you can just look at these as we go through them. We won't collect them and grade you. I got these questions from a webinar recently from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which is the best lobby group for changing federal policy around housing. So we need the National Low Income Housing Coalition very badly, and they're doing good work. So, I just want to take a minute to get started here. To just think about some of the framework for this crisis we're experiencing. Since 1960, average rents have gone up 61% in the United States, while average incomes for renters have gone up how much since 1960? Ooh, we got math whiz.
I was told there would be no math on this quiz.
That's right. Average income, renters' average incomes have gone up 5% since 1960, while rents have gone up 61%. Second one, there are 3,000 counties in the United States. In how many of these 3,000 counties is a full-time, minimum wage job enough to afford a one-bedroom apartment? Get that question clear, man. If you work full-time at minimum wage, in how many of our 3,000 counties can a person afford a one-bedroom apartment? And afford means afforded on 30% of your income. So what do you guess that is?
22.
22. It's 22 counties out of 3,000. The National Low Income Housing Coalition always used to talk about 2-bedroom units. No county in the country can a minimum wage person afford a 2-bedroom unit. Now people can't even afford a 1-bedroom unit in all but a handful of counties. In fact, we have in Michigan a much higher minimum wage than the federal minimum wage, and yet in our county, if you work full-time minimum wage, you can't even afford a studio apartment, a 1-room and a bathroom apartment. So 3, how many renters in America pay more for housing than they can afford? In other words, more than 30% of their income. It's 1 in 2, so about half. About half. And what percent of extremely low income renters are paying more than half their incomes for housing? So this is, extremely low income is the housing term for people who earn or whose income is 30% of the area median or less. So you take median income, divided by 3 basically, and the bottom third, how many of them pay more than half of their incomes for their housing? 71%, right. So those statistics, if you think about that for a minute, that means people, let's take this last one, people who are very poor are paying almost 3/4 of their income to have a place to live. So these are like 4 different ways of looking at what is a huge infrastructure crisis. Often people will talk about what are homeless people doing wrong? What have they done wrong? We view that at Open Doors like a game of musical chairs. As if all of you here came this morning, but we only provided enough chairs for 10. And so you could say that the 30 of you who came after the first 10 were just too slow. But you could, another way to say that is there wouldn't be enough chairs, right? And that's where we're at on housing. There is just not enough housing that people can afford, and it's causing great crisis in the lives of valuable human beings. And we're not talking about only people who are disabled and unable to work. Of course, their status is critical too and important, but we're actually talking about people who work full-time. And it's people who will serve us at Taco Bell when we pick up a taco, or if you go in the gas station to pay for your gas, they're at the cash register there, or they're cleaning our hotel rooms after we use the room and so forth. So Stephanie and I want to talk a little bit just about who are these folks who are in housing crisis. So this is a picture of our staff, a group of our staff that was left after a lunch we had a couple weeks ago. One of our residents made lunch for us in appreciation for her having a place to live. In fact, she lived for quite a while in the home that you all purchased and renovated for us. She now has moved to a different place, but she was in that home for a long time. And so we took a picture of the staff that was there after the lunch was over. Now, we hire people who come through our programs. So some of our staff have been homeless. So in this particular picture, 3 of the people in this picture are homeless, or have been homeless, and are no longer homeless. But as you think about how you imagine homeless people look, I just want to ask, who is that there? I'm sorry. I'm not going to ask you to guess, and I'm not going to tell you. But I don't think you could tell who has been there homeless and who has not. So I could take a picture of you. Could be the same people. Oh, excuse me. You can talk now.
This is Batman and I'm his Robin. So when I look at who we are and the people we serve, what I love about who we are, what we do at Open Doors, we have the gift and blessing of looking at someone and saying, hey, you matter. It doesn't matter your circumstance, okay? You were addicted. Okay, cool. You still matter. Oh, you just came out of incarceration? Okay, that's a circumstance, but you matter. You are not the circumstance. And at Open Doors, we have this thing, we tell people, you are who we want to help. You know, those who have the income, who have the means, who have the education, you have all these other assets. But we want to see and capitalize on those invisible assets that sometimes our communities and our society forget that even are there for people that we serve. And so when I love him. You're gonna make me. And the church, I just have to say, at my church, we would have been running up and down the aisles after those messages today. So that's why I was like, what is happening? You heard this good news, and everybody's like, yeah. I was like, yes, I get it. So I digress for a moment. I just needed to get that out. But when I look at the people that we serve, you know, we at Open Doors, we don't have clients. We don't have tenants. We are shelter providers who happen to do affordable housing. That's who we are. That is the reason we're in this business of housing, because there was a great need for our shelter guests who could not transition and have a successful life. They do all this work in shelter, and they stay clean, they get a job, they save money, and when it's time to transition, there was no place for them to go. So what happened? They met a young woman or a young man at a meeting and said, hey, I got an extra room. Okay, you can come and pay half the rent. Unbeknownst to them, the rent hasn't been paid for 2 months, so they give their money. All of a sudden, there's an eviction, and they recidivate back to the shelter. And so Batman had this wonderful idea, just what can we do as a program to make sure the people that are working very hard to not only survive, but begin to live and thrive, what can we do? And that's how we got into doing affordable housing. Once we did that, it was a community outcry. And we were like, whoa, this is bigger than what we thought. So the need has always been there. What you're seeing today with the parks and all this, we've seen this all along. We've seen this for almost 50 years. The great thing about it right now is we all are seeing a whole nother level. And there's an awakening that's happening here in Kalamazoo. And Open Doors, we have the ability to touch lives, one family, one individual at a time. So when you looked at that picture of our staff, that's one thing I'm proud of too. We know how valuable our neighbors, citizens, brothers and sisters are in this community. We know, so if we can hire them, you can hire them, okay? So, you know, when you look at the pictures and you see these two women, they are doing phenomenal now. One moved back to California, is thriving. Another, she's a recovery coach, and she's going back to college, and her kids just went to Grand Valley State, and one is at Michigan State University. And you would never know that her life was one of addiction for 30% of her kids' life. That's what they grew up in. Now they're thriving, and they're doing that because they matter. And we have the gift of serving with them. We don't have all those things. It's about service. That's what I loved about today's message. What do you want? What do you want? We want to live. We're tired of existing. And at Open Doors, we give individuals and families a chance to say, okay, let's do it. What do you want to do? Tell us what you want to do, and that's how we can partner with you. We don't have the answers for every family, every individual, but together we can figure it out for you and your children. Yeah.
Want to look at another one? What else we got here?
A few summers ago, we had one of our residents who is a grandmother, and she's also an artist. And she wanted to do a craft day with kids every Saturday one Saturday out of the month when the kids were out of school. And this was our first kickoff. And so we had a face painter there, and they made crafts to take home to their families. And yeah, this family right here, actually, the parents were both working. One was working full-time, one was working part-time. They were both in school, and they were living in a Michigan basement with a family member. And today, this family is a homeowner. It took 2 years of support, 2 years of intention, and now they own a home. So, yeah.
Their dad got an IT degree from KVCC, but couldn't get a job after he was working, but he couldn't get a job in that field because he didn't have any experience. And we needed some help in IT, so we hired him. And within weeks, actually, of his starting to work with us, he got a full-time job in information technology, and he's been in that now for several years, 3 years. And they were able to buy a home. So they don't live in our housing anymore.
It worked. It worked.
Oh, that's the family. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Let's talk about her a minute.
Okay, we love her. Well, we love everybody. I'm gonna say that every time. But this is Dixie Jackson. She came to us. She was a resident. She was a longtime employee of the county, and in that job, she wasn't thriving. It was just not a good fit for her. So she left a high-paying job, and now she works in education with children. And today, she is actually our board chair. So she went from resident, living in our properties, went into market rate housing, and now working for CIS and is our board chair. And a wonderful, wonderful lady.
Can I add to that? Can I just add to that?
Yes.
Because she does incredible work, and I had never known that, until she had shared that. Every day, she's making incredible differences with kids and with families, and then when she mentioned that the home on Burdick Street, the very home we worked on, that was what helped get her on the road back, was just an amazing thing here.
What school is she? Is she at Spring Valley?
Edison.
Let's see. Do I have one of those here? No, I don't.
That's our Friday morning staff meeting. And that's all of our staff who come to that meeting. And every Friday, we all put our hands together, and on the count of 3, we say, teamwork makes the dream work. Because it's not one of us who does anything, but together, collectively, we make great things happen for our families and single adults. So, yeah.
Well, I'm passing around a picture about Bill.
Yeah, so, okay, here I go. We love him. We love him. So Billy, like, when we get the opportunity to meet people and you hear their stories and you see them, it does something to your spirit and to your heart. Billy was a man who was incarcerated for half of his life. And a few years ago, we tried to do prisoner reentry housing, and so we were connected to Bethany Reformed, and it didn't work out because of state regulations and things like that. It was too much red tape, and we could not do our programming with the men. So we kind of partnered with the church, and this is how I met Billy. And I remember he came into the office, and I said, Billy, you've been doing this over half your life. What's different now? He said, I'm tired.
Let's put that in a little longer perspective. He had been under state supervision, criminal justice supervision, since he was 12. And he came to me last December to say, Rick, next week I'm going to be off paper, so I'm going to be off parole. And it'll be the first time I've not been under state supervision since I was 12, and I'll be 50 next week.
He's 50.
50, yeah.
Yeah. And so.
So you asked him.
I asked him, like, what's different? Like, and he said, Steph, I'm tired. And I was like, oh, okay. So give me a week. Let me think about it. Let me see what the possibilities are. And within a week, because one of his issues was addiction, so he's in recovery, we had a recovery house for men. and we were able to place him there. And from there, he started working. He traveled a year and a half going back and forth to Three Rivers for employment. And then we got a call that he was interviewing for Loaves and Fishes. And I said, well, you need to call Batman because his tone and he can get it done, right? So now he is a valued employee at Loaves and Fishes. And he purchased a home last year. So it worked. It's about partnership. It's about seeing someone, meeting them where they are, and working from there. And he comes to every community dinner still. He's still very connected. He also, whenever we have a family that is in need of a food referral, he makes sure that they are very well taken care of. Very well taken care of. So we just appreciate him in such a magnificent way. Like, you're gonna make me cry. I just put these lashes on too, y'all. I'm gonna be crying up in here, but it's just, the work is so necessary, it's so important, and we cannot do it by ourselves. This is a man-made issue, this issue of homelessness. It's man-made, and as men and women, we can fix it. We can heal this if we are just intentional about how we go about serving people. Yes.
I'd like to pass around a couple things. One of the ways you can really help us is if you are not on our mailing list, we would love to send you our newsletter 4 times a year. If any of this resonates with you, we'd love you to say, I'm willing to receive that newsletter 4 times a year. You will also get a mailed invitation early summer and mid-November, inviting you to consider a gift to help us do our work. But that's it. So I'd love to have you sign up to join us, to be connected to us. What you'll get is a newsletter like this. It's a one-page thing, and it allows you to stay connected with us. Maybe I'll pass that too, and you can just see what we're talking about. But this is actually our main source of support now, our main source of income is from our residents who pay rent. We do not have the kind of program where our people don't have to contribute. A key way that we survive and are able to do what we do is because our residents pay their fair share. They now are about 40% of our annual budget. And then community donors, supporters in the community. We have a mailing list of about 1,500 people, usually between 600 and 800 give every year. And that's another 30, 35, almost 40% of our budget, depending on the year. So that is what makes it possible for us to do this work. What we thought we'd like to show you is just some of the places where the work happens. So maybe, how about if I do the pictures and you talk?
Rick,
Yes.
if we get the request for money, do we also automatically get the newsletter?
Yes.
Because this doesn't look familiar.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it doesn't to me either.
Oh, if it
I get the
doesn't,
request for money. Yeah.
well then, well, I think unless we have coded you specially for some reason not to get a newsletter. I don't know why that would be. But sign up for the, maybe you should sign up on the clipboard if you don't get the newsletter. Or if you don't remember it. Okay, so.
This building was donated to us a few years ago by Vineyard Outreach when they dissolved. It was a beautifully well-maintained building. And what we did is we moved our men's shelter from Rainey Street, where it had been there for how many years? Yeah, so we moved that, turned that shelter, old shelter, into family housing because we've seen a growth in families with multiple children. So we're looking at families that have 4 to 8. So we were able to move the shelter here. Our support center is next door, so that's where my office and our program manager's office is. So we meet with shelter guests, we meet with residents here in this building, and this is right across the street from Crow's Nest.
Okay. All our buildings are paid for. We don't have mortgages on any of them because We don't buy a building until we have a donor or a group of donors able to purchase the whole building to pay for energy conservation measures and to replace any old major systems like roofs and boilers. So,
This is our next door shelter for women, so it's another duplex. Before, staff lived on the other side and then monitored the women on the other side. And we serve up to 6 women in this property.
These are women without children?
Yes.
this is the house that you purchased and renovated for us.
Currently, there is a mom, a daughter, and a grandbaby living in the 2-bedroom and a single male living upstairs.
That's one of the best projects this church has done.
Really? That's a fantastic project. I also got to meet Ed Birch and
Oh, yeah.
came to love him from that, so it's another reason I'm grateful for that project.
So here we have Rainey Street. This is actually where the Open Door Ministries started. So in this small house right here. Today, this house serves a family of 4. It's a 3-bedroom place. And so, yeah, there's a mom and her children here. This is a 4-unit building right on Park Street, right across from the Susan D. Parish Theater. And then this house is on the park. That is a 5-bedroom shared housing house where we have 3 women that live there and they share common areas.
So
Shared housing.
4 men live here. We have 5 apartments here. Should I move through them fast?
Yeah.
This is our first larger building. We have 19 units here, 2 1-bedroom apartments and 17 studios.
This is right across the street, isn't it?
Right down Academy.
Yeah, and I remember we helped clean that
Yeah.
one year. It's right next to the, oh,
Trinity Lutheran Church gave us this house. It's on Pearl Street, right behind their church. Got 4 apartments in it. We got this property on level, that's 27 units.
Between 2 buildings.
Yeah.
But what I would like for you all to also take notice, when you look at low-income housing or affordable housing, we work very hard at maintaining the exteriors of our properties so you can't determine what is what, which is very important for the families and individuals that we serve, that they feel that they're being treated and they live in a place that they can be proud of, and there's dignity even on the exterior of those units.
One of the things I love about this property is we bought it during the recession. And we were able to get, thanks to the donor, we were able to get 27 units. And they're about a third for studios, 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. And we were able to get 27 units for $315,000, so the price of many people's single-family home. And the donor also gave us $100,000 to fix it up. So the total bill for that purchase was $415,000. But for affordable housing in perpetuity, you know, that's a pretty fabulous thing. That's a fabulous thing. So this is on Stockbridge, a duplex, another duplex. These are 3-bedroom units, each of them. We have 15 units on Duke Street between White's Road and Kilgore. Oops. That's Ray and Ann Sweeney were big parts of this. This was the Restoration Initiative project. A group of folks from your church and several other churches helped us buy a Habitat for Humanity home, and it needed finishing, and this group led the charge on that, and we now have, we've had several families live there, and that's in good use right now today as well. Did you skip some? Uh-oh. What's happening? I want to go back. This is our most recent purchase. 6 units in Millwood on the corner of Portage and Southern. So most of our units are in this neighborhood, in the Vine neighborhood, but we like to spread out a little bit. At this point, all of our units are still in the city of Kalamazoo. We would love to have some in Kalamazoo Township and in Portage as well. And so far, we're in. So we have over 100 rental units now. And we serve, I just checked our census yesterday. We had 138 people in our units yesterday. And some of our units are vacant because they're being remodeled. So whenever somebody moves out, we try to get them back into shape as soon as possible. As soon as they're ready, Stephanie puts a family in because we have a long waiting list. That's one of the sad things. A lot of good work happens, and a lot of people are able to really make significant changes in their lives. The kind of the stressful, sad part is there are so many more people who need the help than we can help. So
I want to also say that every property that we have is on the bus line. So that gives our families and individuals the ability, if they don't have transportation, if transportation falls apart, they're on the bus line. And that makes it much easier for our families to continue working and continuing to do what they need to do to take care of themselves and their children.
So what do we need to do to help improve the housing crisis in our country? And that is a huge and to some degree complex question, although I want to overdo the complexity. We feel like we need we need three things. Public policy solutions are critical. We took a turn as a country in the 1980s away from a commitment to provide housing so that people at all incomes could afford a place to live. We also, since the 80s, have been, in my opinion, steadily reducing and shrinking the supports available to people who are at a difficult crisis level. All those things, I think, have impacted us and have created a situation where lower income people in our country are increasingly in trouble for basic survival. And that's why we see so much evidence now of poor people who can't get even a place to live. And these could be working people, could be disabled people, could be senior citizens, our children, often, many, many children don't have a place to live. So I feel like Open Doors would be betraying our donors and betraying the people we serve if we just said, nonprofit organizations can fix this, just send us money. It's in fact bigger than we are. We need to put behind this the kind of energy we put into building the U.S. highway system, building school. We need to really make sure, and we responded to the need for affordable housing in some ways that soured people on that whole kind of project, but we can do that better. We do it better, and it works. This is our newest property. We've been there for a little over a year, and we just had a lunch on the property for our donors, inviting them to see. We always try to show our new properties. And a neighbor from across the street came to that lunch and said, well, we wanted to meet you because when we heard what you did, we were not pleased that you bought this building. And they said, so we were very worried. And I'll tell you what, we've had two things that annoyed us since you've been here. One is that some of your staff would park in the parking lot with their headlights facing out and they would shine in our windows. And one time, some of your residents had guests that spent some time in the parking lot playing loud music. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good to me. Not too bad. And they said, so we love you now. That's fantastic. And so that was not how I expected that conversation to end. Because people are afraid of affordable housing in their neighborhoods. And some of that is because we haven't done a good job of it as a country in the past. Some of it is just prejudice and fear, but it's a mix. So we can do a good job. The fact that some of our efforts in the past were not good doesn't mean we can't do a good job now. We can do a good job now of providing ways for people to get housing. So policy, we need public policy. We need it locally as well. It's not just the federal level. You know, when a house gets torn down in the city of Kalamazoo, the lot is not big enough to build a house on now, because the lot size requirements prohibit replacing that house with another house. So, and we have a city planner now who is all about that and trying to work on, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So we need, there's a whole, I don't have like the magic one thing we need to do, but there's a whole bunch of public policy changes we need to make to reinforce the need for people to have housing, to have it's an infrastructure need, just like providing clean water, just like providing sewage systems and taking away garbage and providing schools. Having housing that people can afford who are either working or on disability is just part of the infrastructure commitment we as a society need to make. So that's one thing. And that leads to the Isaac meeting coming up this week.
Yes, so that's another way that we can raise our voices to our local officials, to some of our state officials, to people who have the influence to make changes. We're looking at bringing 500 or more people together to say, listen, these are the issues that are happening in our community. Will you say yes to do A, B, C, or D? Right here, right now, will you say yes? And if they say yes, we woo! If they don't, thank you so much, you can sit down or you can leave. That's just how it goes. And it's so important when we have a collective voice and we're addressing the issues that affect the most vulnerable brothers and sisters in our community, that we with a collective voice can say, we as a community are concerned about this. And we need you to be even more concerned because you have the power, influence, and authority to make changes. That's what this Isaac meeting is about. And it's so important that we get as many people there to raise our voices together at a vibration where they cannot deny it. It is important. And it all happens because we matter. You matter, we matter, I matter, Rick, everybody matters. And those people who are most vulnerable matter the most. If you want to gauge the health of a city, take a look at how their most vulnerable are living. Don't take a look at the high rises going up. Don't take a look at all the development that is happening. Don't take a look at that because that is a false perception. But if you can go to the ones who are struggling the most, that will tell you how healthy you are as a city. And right now, Kalamazoo is not healthy. It is not healthy. But there is a cure. And together, we have the cure. And when you put it all in perspective, it's about love. It's about love. And so, when we can all do that for one another, even when we don't know you, I may not know you personally, but the spirit and being of me knows you. And we're all together. So please, if you can, come to this Isaac meeting at Mount Zion. Be there because we're going to be hooping and hollering. And if they don't agree, they can be quiet and leave the building. We only want ones there that are going to make a change.
6 o'clock Thursday,
Yes.
and the program itself starts at 6:45.
That's great.
And I just want to give Ray a shout out, he and Ann. We're on the task force together.
Yeah, so Mary Whitaker Duncan is member of the Housing Task Force. Stephanie is co-chair of it with Toby Hannah Davis. And so thank you for your leadership and for being at Open Doors, really. It's
I wanted to shout you out.
But at any rate, we need to make a lot of noise. And the neat thing is, when you're in a group of people making a lot of noise, you kind of get a feeling, yeah, this can happen. And that's what we need, because a lot of things have to happen. But fair chance housing is one of the things that we're advocating for, and that will, like ban the box, did for employment applications. Landlords should not just say, oh, you've been in prison, I'm not even gonna consider you. They get a chance, hopefully, to be able to say, well, yes, I made some mistakes, but here's who I am now,
Yeah.
and judge me now.
Yeah. Some of those mistakes, what people are experiencing are criminal backgrounds that are up to 35 years old. So from 35 years, never done anything else, worked full-time every day, taking care of their family, but something that happened when you were 18, 19, 20 is still affecting your ability to be in not just housing, but affordable quality housing. So we're addressing those issues. We want to do that. We want to create more protective classes for individuals and families as it pertains to housing. So, yes, Ray.
Yeah, well, although we've focused on this this, what do you call it? The meeting on Thursday.
Isaac?
Yeah, public meeting. But our task forces are not going to drop the ball at that point and go, we're going on. So join us. There's task forces on poverty, on racism, and on housing. Those three are the emphases.
Which is a fabulous exercise of our community life together, to engage these policies and these complex issues and to start trying to talk about how can we improve. It's critical that citizens get involved in that. So one thing is the public policy level. Another thing is we believe also that we can make a difference just as people who want to improve their community. I feel like Open Doors discovered a good model here. People can come together, buy existing homes, or maybe someday we'll buy and build a new one. Well, our one new one is the one that the Restoration Initiative finished from Habitat. But we don't have to wait for federal policy changes to do everything. We can also just say, hey, this matters to us. And we can buy homes and refurbish them and charge affordable rents and make it possible. And we have to subsidize those rents, it's true, to offer our support services and to pay for all the bills. But our tenants, residents pay the lion's share of the fundamental costs for their housing. And we charge about 55% of what the federal government says is the fair market rate in Kalamazoo County. So we feel like it's doable for local citizens also to respond to this crisis and to make a difference. We don't have to just act like there's nothing we can do until the government does something. We can actually do something ourselves. So we'd love to invite you to join us. Maybe someday you'll have an idea for a house we could get or an apartment building we could buy. We'd love to talk with you about that. And we've been delighted to be a partner with your congregation over many years to work on these issues together. And so we're grateful. So that's what we wanted to share with you this morning. Any questions for us? Yes.
What do you do in the area of counseling and money management and that sort of thing?
So glad you asked that. So part of being in our program is for families in our shelter program is a requirement that you go to work, that you save money. So in our shelter program, our guests have to turn in their paychecks every pay period. And from there, we sit down and we do a financial budget every pay period. So we're teaching those habits of what is needs versus wants. What's important. And so 30% of whatever they bring into shelter, their net pay goes into what we call a do not touch fund. That money is specifically for your housing costs, future housing costs, once you move out of shelter. And so for shelter guests that transition into the residence community for working people, that's our affordable housing component, the 100 and something units Rick talked about earlier. We continue that programming on. For those individuals who do not go through our shelter program and enter into the residence community, we do a family plan with them. And so when we do that family plan, we also bring in the children because you're part of the family. So we want to kind of change some things. So what is your plan? What are your goals? What are your dreams as a third grader? What do you want? And so we incorporate that whole family plan. And oftentimes it's dealing with credit issues and we're doing a budget. So as long as they're sticking to the course of the plan that they created, and we're just partnering and holding them accountable to, we save a certain amount every pay period or every month. Two of the things that we notice when a family is going into financial crisis, rent is laid a number of times in a row. Something's happening, you're not adhering to the budget, so that's when they get a phone call, or maybe you're gonna knock on the door. The other thing is if a relapse happens, if they relapse in their recovery. Those are two major things that we take a look at, and that also impedes the money. So we always, once we see that, we bring them in and say, look, how do we get back on course? What do you need from us? So oftentimes that meeting will take place twice a month. It may be weekly now that we're budgeting to make sure that you're back on course. So that money management piece is key to a family's ability to stay in permanent affordable housing.
I would say also that part of what we offer is community. So our staff, which includes people who've been through this whole process themselves, it's not professional expertise we offer, but it's having been through it ourselves and are like a family member that tries to sort through with you, or a good friend. So when people have all kinds of issues, like my boss is treating me disrespectfully, or I got a car and it just died, or I've learned about a health problem, or I can't access stuff I need for mental health care, or whatever. People come to our staff and talk that through. So we've tried to set up this program so that our staff are your allies. We're not trying to check on you to punish you. We're trying to check on you to be partners with you. And part of how we establish that relationship is that we don't set rents based on your income. We set rents so that people working full-time at minimum wage can afford them, which is true for most of our units, not our largest units. We really, that's a challenge. So it's costs a little bit more than 30% of your income to get our largest units. But for most, that's how we set them. Then if you make more money than when you came to us, that's all good for you. So you can share those successes with us, and we're not going to ding you because you made more money. That didn't seem, when we developed this program, that didn't seem like, why would you want to set up that kind of adversarial relationship? We want to celebrate when you're making more, and we want to know. So we don't. Now we do if somebody is making a lot more money than when they came to us, and sometimes that happens. People will come to us with no job, who are homeless, and say after 6 months in our shelter, then moving into our rental housing, they're working at, say, a meat packing plant, now they're a supervisor. I mean, so somebody who went from zero income to maybe $40,000 a year. Then we ask those families to come in and say, okay, you don't really need us anymore for housing. So we'd like to make a year plan for you to start thinking about where you want to go next and make your place available to a person who is in trouble like you are, who is in trouble now like you were in the past. And that's really exciting, actually. So we now have that sort of that conversation is part of what we do. And then if people are kind of like not getting that picture, then we'll raise their rents. So then we will say, well, okay, we had this plan for you, we were thinking this year you might be able to move on, but it didn't work. Okay, but we really want you to keep working at that, and this year your rent's going to go up $50 a month. So that we just sort of slowly squeeze that a little bit to keep encouraging you to move on. And that actually was a big struggle in our organization, but it was part of our learning. When people did well, we needed to help them move the next step so that their unit would open up. And I resisted that, but I was shown the error of my ways. I actually believe that. I used to argue that if a person who's a dishwasher at a hotel has a car and an apartment, that's a success. You don't have to buy a home to be a success. But I always use the example of one particular guy, and he came to a point in his life, I always used him as an example of the guy who was always gonna need us. And he came to a point in his life where he came to meet with us and he said, my mom died and I can have the couch that she had in her living room. And I entered recovery on that couch and there's not enough room in my apartment for it. So I'm gonna move. And I thought, what? All these years I've been saying we can't kick people out because you're gonna live with us forever. And now he's been stably housed in fair market housing for years. So I was wrong. So anyway, but.
But the great thing about when our families transition too, like Rick said before, although they're no longer in our housing, there's still relationship. And so that key piece, that is the key to our success. It's really building that relationship. So when I think about what we do, the very idea that our mission statement says who we are and what we do, building relationships to overcome homelessness. And at the end, it closes out by saying, in response to God's love for all. And it means exactly that. And so that relationship piece is critical to our success and to the success of our families.
Tell us, you mentioned the community dinner. Where is that held and how many of your people come to it?
No, you go ahead.
It's the third Sunday of every month. It's sometimes in the parking lot of one of our apartment buildings in nice weather, and we do. Otherwise, it's in the fellowship hall at Trinity Lutheran Church, which is close to most of our units. It varies between maybe 30 people to our Christmas gathering in December is probably our best attended, and I would say that's 70 maybe, 70 or 80 people.
Is it a potluck?
No. We have churches or other groups bring the food. Once in a while it's a potluck. Once in a while we have a chili cook-off.
Every January.
Yeah. But once a year.
It's rigged, y'all. Every year it's rigged. I haven't won yet.
The first year I competed in the chili cook-off, the guy who actually announced the votes went down through all the votes, it's like 7 chilies or 9 chilies, something like that, until he got to 8. And he said, Rick and Bubba's chili tied for 8 and 9. I thought, really? You had to announce all that? So I'm still trying to recover from that. So we do that every month. That's a volunteer option for groups to bring a meal for, say, 40 is what we usually recommend. And then people come. It's an hour long. We have a little raffle where we draw names, and then people get to get prizes and so forth. And the children come, and there's a children's raffle.
That's
Yes.
for people who are living in the shelter or
All our programs and graduates from our programs.
And we've also, and family members of the people that we serve and partner with too. So it's just open. The more the merrier.
About how long of a stay? I mean, what's the range, or is there a limit? People, in the housing. So
In our shelters, the average stay is about 2 to 3 months. I think last year it was 2 months, 58 days I think last year. In our rental housing, I just calculated the current average of our residents. They have been with us 2.5 years on average. We have one person who moved into our housing in 2006, but then it goes several years before we have one who's next in line from her. She's been with us the longest. But most of our people, we turn over about 25 to 30% of our units a year. Most of those are successful moves, like all but 4 or 5 are successful moves. Some of those are moves where we have to say it didn't work this time. When you want to try again, let's talk again. So, any other questions?
I have a question. Like, you mentioned that, you know, you work a budget with them, if they're working, but do you, like, they come to you and needing housing, do they have to be working, or do you help them find jobs too?
For a residence community, there has to be income in the household.
Okay.
Yes.
So for our shelters, you come without any income,
Okay.
and we take care of all expenses for however long you live in our shelter, which is a home for 6 people at a time. So we serve about 70 or 80 there a year. But in our rental housing model, it requires that the people who live there be able to pay. So now some people lose their jobs while they're with us, and we have applied for and gotten now for several years a grant that allows us to say when people lose their jobs, and right now the economy's so good that this isn't triggered as often as it used to be, but when you lose your job or you work at a Taco Bell and they reduce your hours from 35 a week to 12, tell us right away. So if people tell us we've lost our job or we've had a radical decrease in our hours, then if they make a plan to meet weekly with our support staff, we can offer to subsidize their rent a month at a time for 3 months while they recover and get a new job. And that has eliminated that as a reason that people have to leave. Which is really cost effective for us, because it's expensive for us when people have to leave. So it's been beautiful to be able to say, hey, we can help you now. Generally, we don't pay 100% of the rent during that time, although we would if it was essential. But we have money now that we can subsidize that rent while they recover and get another job.
The eviction process is very expensive and costly long-term. So we really try to circumvent that when we can. Even when it doesn't work out with the family, if there's some things choices that they've made that may impact their neighbor, we will call them in and say, we can do this either way. You can relinquish your keys to us now. You can get life back in order, and in 6 months you can try it again. Or if we have to go the legal route and go through court, that changes the dynamics of our relationship. So oftentimes families and individuals are apt to say, okay, I can have keys to you, and then I want to try it again in 6 months. So it's all about that relationship and respecting someone's journey. We may not understand the choices that you're making, but it's your journey, and we're going to still love you through it. And that's part of what we do.
Have you had success with people reapplying after 6 months?
Yep. Yep. And we are excited about it.
Some of our most successful people actually are people who are on the 2nd or 3rd try.
Sometimes physical.
That includes shelters. Some of the pictures I showed are people who had to leave the shelter because they weren't willing to do what that program required, and then came back. Sometimes only a few weeks. We say you have to wait 2 weeks, but then came back and redid it, and it worked. Because sometimes you're just not ready to do what you have to do. So that's one of the beauties, actually. We have a lot of people who are veterans of that, and we crack jokes about that, or they'll crack jokes about that. So I think we've used up our time. I want to thank you again for both for your interest and your questions, for being the kind of church that cares about this stuff. I'm so grateful to you for that. We would like to be your partners in helping more people in our community have places to live, and we are grateful. We'd like to continue that. We are grateful for your being part of that effort together. Let's support each other and keep working at it, because there's lots of work to do. Oh, there you go.
Y'all part of the team now.